After the everything bubble and the fragile finance piece, this one asks a simple question. What do we actually do with gold? Imagine every bar stacked into a single cube, shiny, finite, and oddly ceremonial. People buy it to sleep better at night. Governments hoard it to show strength. Jewelers turn it into bling. Industry uses tiny slivers in electronics. But mostly, gold is a story we all agree on. It's insurance, status, and psychology wrapped in metal. In a world where paper promises fail, that preserves value when chaos arrives. Billions of years before banks, markets, or bubbles, gold was born in chaos, the kind that ripped stars apart. When massive stars exploded, they forged heavy metals like gold and flung them across the universe. Some of that cosmic debris landed here, sinking deep into Earth's crust. Over time, rivers carved through rock, revealing tiny flashes of yellow sunlight buried in the dirt. Humans noticed. They didn't know it came from space, only that it was beautiful, untarnished, and rare. Long before it became money or a hedge against collapse, gold was simply stardust that refused to fade. When early humans began trading, they started with what made sense. Cows, salt, barley, things you could eat or use. But these weren't easy to carry, divide, or store. Then came gold. It didn't rust, it was rare but not impossible to find, and it could be melted, shaped, and weighed. More importantly, it looked eternal. People didn't need it to survive. They needed to believe in it, and that belief spread fast. Suddenly, shiny metal replaced cattle as the foundation of trust. Gold wasn't practical money, it was psychological money, value powered entirely by collective faith. As civilizations expanded, gold stopped being just decoration. It became order. Rulers began stamping their faces onto coins, turning beauty into authority and metal into money. Suddenly, trade didn't depend on trust between strangers. It depended on the ruler's promise carved into every coin. Uniformity created confidence. A coin from Athens or Persia meant something. Merchants could travel, buy, and sell without barter or guesswork. Gold had evolved from symbol to system, from ornament to engine of empire. Every shiny coin wasn't just currency, it was propaganda, proof that power, faith, and value could all fit in your hand. By the 15th century, gold wasn't just wealth, it was obsession. When Spanish conquistadors landed in the Americas, they didn't see civilizations, they saw glitter. The Aztecs used gold for worship and art, not currency, but to Spain it meant power. They melted temples into coins, filled ships with treasure, and fed an empire built on greed. Mountains of gold sailed east, funding wars, cathedrals, and monarchs who believed their rule was divine. But all that gold came at a cost: conquest, slavery, collapse. What began as beauty had become blood money, fueling centuries of empire and exploitation. By the 19th century, hauling gold around was impractical, so banks created a shortcut: paper promises. You'd hand over your gold, and they'd give you a note that said, "We owe you this much." It was lighter, faster, and safer to trade. 1 ounce of gold equaled $20, and as long as people trusted the banks, paper worked just like metal. But this was the first great illusion of modern finance, that paper and gold were the same thing. The system now relied on faith, not metal. The moment that faith cracked, everything behind those notes would crumble. In the early 1900s, bank panics were constant. People would rush to withdraw their money, terrified the bank wouldn't have enough gold to pay them back. So the United States tried something new: one bank to rule them all, the Federal Reserve. It would control the flow of money, step in during crises, and keep smaller banks from collapsing. At least, that was the idea. But with that power came temptation. Once you can print money to stabilize the system, you can also inflate bubbles, delay pain, and quietly shift control from markets to a single institution. By the time the Great Depression hit in the 1930s, the gold standard had become a trap. Every US dollar was tied to a fixed amount of gold, which meant the government couldn't print more money to revive the economy. As banks failed and panic spread, people hoarded gold, draining reserves and freezing trade. President Roosevelt made a drastic move. He ended the public's right to exchange dollars for gold. It was controversial, but it worked. The economy slowly recovered, yet something fundamental changed. From that moment on, money was no longer metal, it was trust, pure belief. After World War II, the world was broke, except the United States. So in 1944, global leaders met in Bretton Woods to rebuild the financial system. Their solution: make the US dollar the center of everything. Every other currency would tie its value to the dollar, and the dollar itself would be backed by gold at $35 an ounce. It sounded perfect: stability, trust, and order under one currency. But it also gave America enormous power to print, lend, and dominate global trade. The dollar became as good as gold until the world discovered it wasn't. In 1971, President Richard Nixon broke the final link between money and gold. Foreign nations had started demanding real gold for their US dollars, and America didn't have enough to deliver. So Nixon went on television and announced that the dollar would no longer be redeemable for gold, ever. Overnight, money became pure faith. No metal, no backing, just government decree. Economists called it a fiat system, but in practice it meant this: if the government needs more money, it can simply create it. That freedom reshaped the world economy and quietly made inflation a permanent feature of modern life. Today, gold isn't about fashion or even tradition, it's about fear. When currencies wobble, when governments print money like confetti, investors run back to the one thing they can touch. Central banks are quietly stockpiling gold again, especially in countries like China, Russia, and Turkey. They see it as protection from a dollar-dominated world that feels less stable by the day, and it's not just nations. Regular people are buying coins, bars, even digital tokens backed by gold. In a world built on paper promises and fragile trust, the ancient metal has once again become the ultimate just-in-case. Gold feels safe because it's simple, solid, timeless, untouchable by politicians or algorithms. But that safety comes with trade-offs. Gold doesn't pay interest, it doesn't innovate, and when markets boom, it just sits there. It's protection, not progress. Still, in times like these, debt crises, inflation, collapsing trust, it does what it's always done: waits. That's why the smart investors don't go all in or all out. They balance. A little gold for defense, a little risk for growth. Because history is clear: empires fall, currencies fail, but cycles always reset. The real question isn't gold versus paper, it's survival versus opportunity.